Ninjas were all the rave in the late 80s and early 90s. It was everywhere in our culture. On movie screens with movies like Three Ninjas, American Ninja 4, and Blind Fury, in cartoons with the Ninja Turtles, and in video games. We had Ninja Gaiden, Ninja Warriors, and the Shinobi series. Among the many ninja inspired titles of the era, one stood out and has withstood the test of time: the masterpiece Shinobi III Return of the Ninja Master. Released in 1993 for the Sega Genesis, this sequel pushed the Shinobi series to new heights, blending action, artistry, and innovation into an unforgettable experience. Team Shinobi, led by directors Takashi Mutasashi and Tomoyuki Ito, created one of the greatest games of the 16-bit era. Players step into the role of Joe Musashi, the ultimate ninja, on a mission to take down the sinister Neo-Z organization. With vengeance in his heart and justice on his side, Musashi battles relentless foes across breathtaking landscapes, from forests full of enemies to secret labs with grotesque bioweapons lurking in every corner. However, what truly sets Shinobi 3 apart is its revolutionary gameplay. The fluid controls gave players the ability to pull off acrobatic moves like wall jumps and somersaults, and the ability to unleash some devastating ninjutsu techniques, making every fight feel dynamic and rewarding. The visuals to this day are some of the best looking detailed sprites of the 16-bit era, with their vibrant colors and smooth animations. With truly gorgeous environments and scenery, players were immersed in a vivid world of danger and excitement. Meanwhile, a pulse-pounding soundtrack by Hirofumi Murasaki and team elevated the action to legendary heights. Decades later, Shinobi 3 remains a beloved classic, a game that defined what it meant to be a ninja in the golden age of gaming. Whether you're a veteran fan or discovering it for the first time, join me as I dive into the legacy of the timeless adventure and uncover what makes it a shining gem in gaming history. The early 90s marked a pivotal point for the Sega Genesis. Sega was in the midst of an intense console war with Nintendo, and both were battling for dominance in the golden 16-bit era. With a 2-year head start in the US market, Sega had built momentum. Then, with the release of Sonic 2 in 1992, it had cemented itself as a major contender. At the time, the Sega Genesis was considered the cool kids console. Sega had a marketing slogan that went, "Sega does what Nintendo don't," and it held 55% of the US market. Sega was looking to keep its foot on the gas. It was looking for its next big hit outside of the Sonic franchise. Sega's strategy was simple: diversify its lineup and appeal to a gambit of players. With platformers like Sonic 2, Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse, and a slew of other 16-bit Disney games, it was looking to attract older audiences. It had established itself with platformers like the Sonic franchise and some kid-friendly entries like Mickey, Castle of Illusion, but it was looking to attract older audiences. Around this time, we also saw an explosion of the ninja genre throughout media. We had blockbuster films like the Ninja Turtles, Three Ninjas, and American Ninja. We had TV shows, comics, video games. Everywhere you turned, you saw ninjas. The stealthy warriors captured the imagination of audiences worldwide. Gaming embraced the ninja archetype with titles like Ninja Gaiden, Shadow of the Ninja, even Sega's own Revenge of Shinobi in 1989, which serves as the canonical predecessor of Shinobi 3, Return of the Ninja Master. You see, at this juncture in gaming, Nintendo was trying to avoid those violent video games and games like Mortal Kombat that had real core differences between the Sega Genesis version and the Super Nintendo version. For example, the Sega Genesis version had a cheat code that would turn on the blood, as opposed to the Super Nintendo version, which had sweat instead of the blood. The companies were looking at two different demographics. This is where Sega leaned into the Nintendo moniker, and it had racier ads in magazines, and it really was pushing itself as the adult console. In 1992, Sega tapped the shoulder of the development team at Sega AM7. They donned the moniker Team Shinobi. The team was led by director Takeshi Matsuhashi and Tomoyuki Ito. They were tasked with creating a direct sequel to the 1989 hit The Revenge of Shinobi, and it would prove to be a daunting task. The game was slated to release in '92, and for the most part had been completed. Publications like EGM, Game Informer, and Famitsu all shared screenshots and details of the game, with some publications even having early reviews posted. The articles highlighted gameplay elements like backflips that could be used to dodge attacks, enemy designs, and even a mech riding segment. The early stage layouts were drastically different from the final version of the game. The first boss is a clear example. It's an encounter that occurs in a cavern, but in the first version of the game, you fight the boss on the top of a mountain in front of a moonlit background. Everything shown to publications in '92 would end up on the cutting room floor. While Sega and the team at AM7 felt like the game was serviceable, They also felt like it lacked behind the 1989 hit. They felt like the music wasn't there, the gameplay wasn't refined enough, and they could do better, and they did. They went ahead and did the unthinkable at the time. They delayed the game. This is unprecedented for games of that era. Unlike today, where game development is measured in years, then it was in magnitude of months. It wasn't a decision that was taken lightly, as now they're putting a lot of pressure on the development team and they were on a tight schedule. They redid everything from the ground up. Using the original as inspiration, they would rebuild the game into the version that would go on and hit store shelves. This was a big deal at the time because it really put them up against the clock. So, as history would tell, 93 also had Sonic 3 releasing, so they couldn't really step on each other's toes. They had to release this game, but they also had to be careful not to step on Sonic 3's release period because that's also a big game for Sega. Having made the decision to scrap their initial work and start over, Team Shinobi was under immense pressure to deliver. They had to deliver by 1993 while also avoiding Sonic 3's release date. Initially, they felt like the game was too slow, so they refined the movement to create a smoother, more dynamic experience. The backflip was replaced, and they re-added the somersault that served as a double jump. They gave Musashi new abilities, including melee attacks triggered by close proximity to enemies, a diving kick for aerial combat, and a guard move to block projectiles. Sprinting was also introduced, increasing the pace of gameplay and making Joe's movements more fluid and responsive. Levels were overhauled to strike a balance between simplicity and variety. Stages were reconstructed into rounds, each consisting of 3 levels, 2 with sub-bosses and a third featuring more challenging boss. This change not only extended the game's length, but also improved its pacing. Complex stage concepts such as the mech riding and 3D scrolling sequences were scaled back in favor of auto-scrolling levels, which served as a showcase of the console's parallax abilities. Players now guided Joe through exhilarating moments like horse riding, surfing on a jet-powered board, and dodging energy blasts from a distant boss. These changes brought a cinematic flair to the gameplay while keeping development manageable. Joe's ninjutsu tools from the last game made a welcome return also. He could summon pillars of fire to defeat all the enemies on screen, he could shield himself with an electric barrier as a defensive tactic, and during tricky platforming sections, you could use a ninjutsu tool that increased your movement speed and jump height. Joe also had the ability to explode at the cost of a 1-up. Musashi could also explode at the cost of a 1-up. This could be used during boss battles to avoid starting over. The dev team didn't forget its predecessor, bringing back some of the old familiar foes people knew and grew to love from Revenge Shinobi. It was evident that the team cared about the game. They really redid everything, and they took some pieces of the old soundtrack and infused it as samples for the new soundtrack. A lot of folks inside the Sega development team actually think that the game would have been a hit if it was released as originally intended, but it wasn't up to their standard, and that's something that I feel like we've lost in gaming now, where we get these games that are half-baked and then patched later on. On July 22nd, 1993, Shinobi 3, Return of the Ninja Master finally hit store shelves, and the reception was everything Sega could have hoped for. The publication, Mean Machine Sega, celebrated the game's visuals, calling them stunning with beautifully drawn backgrounds and sprites, and the animation is superb. Electronic Gaming Monthly praised the responsive controls and new moves, as well as the distinct visuals. The graphics are excellent, with large, well-animated sprites, and the control is very responsive. The new moves add a lot to the game. The soundtrack was another standout feature. Composers Hirofumi Murasaki, Morihiko Akiyama, and Masayuki Nago created a score that pushed the Sega Genesis sound hardware to its limits. The soundtrack is often mistaken as the work of Yuzo Koshiro, the legendary composer responsible for Streets of Rage 1 and 2, as well as Revenge of Shinobi. The team considered the mistake an honor. The trio delivered a dynamic, explosive, and unforgettable soundtrack. Tracks like the opening theme, Shinobi, really set the stage with epic grandeur. Each of them added adrenaline to the auto-scrolling stages, while the ending theme, Sakura, captured a sense of melancholy and triumph, a perfect conclusion to the ninja's journey. The enemy designs showed impressive creativity. going beyond typical ninjas to include mutant bioweapons lurking in the secret laboratories, to a hulking boss that closely resembles Hulk Hogan in Suburban Commando, or at least I think so. But what really set Shinobi 3 apart was its level design. Each stage showcased thoughtful craftsmanship, seamlessly integrating Joe Musashi's new abilities, whether sprinting through lush forests, dodging obstacles on horseback, or battling enemies aboard a speeding jetboard. Every level offered a fresh and exhilarating experience. Shinobi 3 Return of the Ninja Master wasn't just a sequel, it was a masterpiece. Team Shinobi set out to surpass their previous work, and they succeeded in every way imaginable. They surpassed everything that was done in Revenge of Shinobi, and really left their mark on the 16-bit era. The years following Shinobi 3 were less kind to the series. The Sega Saturn Shinobi Legions attempted to carry the torch but struggled to meet expectations. Famitsu in Japan gave it a 26 out of 40, and EGM rated it respectable with an 8 out of 10. Two inconsistent reviews, but most critics agreed it lacked the polish and innovation of its predecessor. The series wouldn't resurface until 2002 with Shinobi on the PlayStation 2, which departed from its platforming roots in favor of a pure action approach. While the game had its fans, critics noticed its punishing difficulty and uneven level design. The 2004 sequel, Nightshade, attempted to refine the formula, but failed at leaving a lasting impression. It was deemed clunky, unnecessary, and uninspired. By 2011, Shinobi 3D for the Nintendo 3DS marked the series' most recent entry, but it fell into obscurity, offering little to distinguish itself. However, hope remains for the return of the Ninja Master. At the Game Awards in 2023, Sega unveiled plans to revive several of its iconic franchises, including Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, Jet Set Radio, and Shinobi. The teaser revealed a 2D cel-shaded Shinobi game in development by Lizard Cube, the talented crew behind the Streets of Rage 4. If Lizard Cube's attention to detail and reverence for the source material are any indication, fans may soon witness the triumphant return of the Ninja Master. I think it goes without saying that I love this game a lot. It's one of my favorite games of all time. It's a staple of my childhood, and I go back to it every so often. It was fun playing this on the Sega Genesis and just hearing those sounds and reliving those moments. It's one of those games that really stays with you, and I hope you give it a shot and go out and play it.